Moments ago, now independent MP Jane Philpott stood in the House of Commons on a point of privilege where she laid out her case that she and Jody Wilson-Raybould's dismissal from the Liberal caucus violated the law.
The Prime Minister stated at the April 2nd open meeting of the Liberal caucus and on national television that, quote, I have taken the decision to expel, quote, the honourable members from caucus. The Prime Minister added that he had met with me and the member for Vancouver-Granville to inform us of his decision. This confirms that we were expelled prior to the commencement of the Liberal caucus meeting.
All right, with more on this, I'm joined by the host of Power Play, Don Martin. Don, good morning to you. Exactly what's going on here with Dr. Philpott?
Yeah, I don't want to get too far into the parliamentary weeds on this one, but bottom line is there is an act that says this is the process for kicking an MP out of a caucus. And it basically says there has to be an application to the caucus signed by a certain number of MPs, and then there has to be a recorded vote. Clearly, in the case of Philpott and Wilson-Raybould, that was not done. The Prime Minister unilaterally said, you're gonzo, and that was that. Although they do refuse to say whether there's a recorded vote, and they do seem to suggest that caucus supported it, which may or may not be true, but it certainly doesn't look like that act was followed, and that's what Philpott was rising on. Now, we've talked to Rob Walsh, former law clerk for the House of Commons, and a man who knows all things about these parliamentary procedures, Marcia, and he basically says, look, inside a caucus, certain rules don't apply, including the Speaker has no right to rule that rules were not followed inside that caucus meeting. They're kind of a hodgepodge group. They get together. You don't have to be part of that caucus. So that's basically her complaints are groundless, at least in his view.
What does it tell us, though, about where her head is at?
Well, she's not going quietly into the independent backbenches. She's making sure that she believes that due process should be followed. Wilson-Raybould may or may not give a similar statement down the road, even possibly later today, but they're not happy with how they were treated. So they're going to make some noise, and that's not good news for Justin Trudeau, who's quickly trying to take a giant broom and sweep all this under the carpet. He's still going to face some pushback from them, and they are, as some polls show, phenomenally popular in their ridings. They could cakewalk to an election victory right now if they were running again. So he's got a force on the outside now instead of a problem on the inside.
Did the Prime Minister follow the rules here, though? Michael Chong is an Ontario Conservative MP who sponsored the 2014 Reform Act, and he joins me here in studio. Hi, Mr. Chong. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thanks for coming in. Let me just ask you to first lay out what your bill, which was passed, what are the rules under which Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott would be able to be kicked out? Like, how would that work?
So the first rule, which is the caucus expulsion rule, says that there's a two-step process. First, 20% of the caucus had to have written to the caucus chair requesting an expulsion vote. And then second, a majority of caucus, not just members present, but a majority of the entire caucus would have had to have voted on a secret ballot to expel in order for the expulsion to take place. So in the Liberal caucus, there had been 179 members. That meant that at least 36 Liberal members of Parliament would have had to have written to the caucus chair. Once he received at least 36 letters, he could then call a caucus, secret ballot vote in caucus on the expulsion of Ms. Wilson-Raybould and Ms. Philpott. If 90 members of that caucus voted to expel, then they would have been expelled. And if only 120 members showed up for that vote, you still require 90 members.
So there had to be a vote.
There had to be a vote, and it had to be an absolute majority of all members, not just members.
Okay, here's what the caucus chair said about that. That's not the way we do things in the National Liberal Caucus. We don't vote typically. We never opted into the rules that were suggested by the Conservative Private Members Bill by Michael Chong. We operate by convention, and our party's convention is that membership in caucus is determined by the leader of the party, informed by caucus, of course. So his assertion is that essentially an overwhelming majority of caucus did support this. That was conveyed to the Prime Minister, but ultimately the party and members of the party decided that the Prime Minister makes that decision.
Well, it's shocking to hear that from a sitting member of Parliament because it's a clear undermining of the rule of law. It doesn't matter who originally sponsored the bill, whether it was a Conservative MP that introduced a private member's bill or a Liberal MP. The bill became law. Parliament decided to adopt this bill into law. It became law, and it's the law of the land. And the law says that at the first caucus meeting of a caucus after a general election, 4 recorded votes are to take place determining the power of the Prime Minister and the power of Liberal MPs. Those 4 recorded votes did not take place in direct contravention of the law. It is illegal, and it's a violation of the law.